What is up, everyone? I got another one for y'all. So we're gonna talk about the H skiff and my hard lessons learned with it, trying to push it to like the best of its performance. But I've got to swallow my pride and start talking about what it isn't and what it's not able to do, because let's face it, it is a micro skiff, and as of recent, with my son going out there with me on the water, I've been trying to treat it like an actual full-size technical poling skiff, and it just does not work. So let's turn the camera around and we're gonna start right up here. Weight capacity of this thing is 480 pounds. So with my son and myself, we're about 50 pounds shy of the capacity. In order to effectively use this little monster out there in the skinny water marshes, like the bayous are fairly deep, about on average, I'm gonna say 3 to 4 foot deep. You need a trolling motor to go through that, because you don't want to use the push-pull to try to push through the bayous, and in high winds, it just makes for a bad trip. Only one person's going to be able to fish, and that's going to be the bow angler right there. The other person will be back here on the poling platform trying to push it through. So we had to get the Minn Kota. This is a game changer. It's going to allow both anglers to fish at the same time, and just a better overall fishing experience. But because of this is 30 pounds. Now that puts us right at our weight capacity. And not only that, you got your batteries. Thank goodness we have lithium batteries from our kayak fishing platform. I've got 2 of them, but I'm only able to bring 1 out. They're 7 pounds each, so we're able to shave 7 pounds off the weight of the skiff. We've also got a fish finder on board, and that's another 2.5 pound battery right there. Lithium, thank goodness we had it from the kayak. You got the fish finder right here, so you have eyes underwater. We've got a fishing net, fish grip, the measure board for the fish. You got tackle here, you got tackle inside here, and then I've got my little camera bag, which is just basically nothing but batteries inside there. I used to carry a big old like camera case. It's a Pelican style with a massive Sony and a telephoto lens, and that was pretty cumbersome in weight, so we had to ditch that, and now we go out there bare bones. We also have all the safety equipment required by the state and the Coast Guard. So flares, an air horn, what else? A fire extinguisher, because we do have an inboard fuel tank, and yeah, you get the idea. The GoPro hats, your fishing rods, all of that stuff is added weight, and now we have exceeded our weight limit. So we were constantly taking on water inside the cockpit. I could never figure it out, but through trial and error, we finally figured out that this one-way valve back here, it's either broken or it just basically is a bad design. I'm gonna lean towards a bad design because it's brand new, and these are gravity fed drains on each side. You got one right there, that one right there. What I've done was remove the little drain grate, and I plugged them with 2 boat plugs, and that has stopped the water from coming in. It would basically come in through here. It was a wet ride afterwards because of all the weight that we had. The water line should theoretically be down here, but because of all the pounds that we've got on board, it's literally riding right below the bumper. And I was thinking that maybe water was getting in through this seam, but that's not the case. It was because of the drains through there, and then I could not figure out why I kept having to run the bilge to get water out from below the cockpit deck inside the hull. I figured that one out as well whenever I pulled this little storage compartment. I unscrewed all of that to run my wiring for the fish finder, and I quickly found out that the center console is not sealed, so the water comes in here when it's sloshing around. It goes underneath there and it goes into the deck, because there is a hole underneath this to access the fuel tank. So underneath that is the fuel tank as well. and that's where a lot of our water was getting in from. So that was kind of a nuisance figuring that out, but we did. And again, that's a self-induced problem because of all the weight that we're throwing on it. So the safe handling capacity, 480 pounds. We've exceeded that well over probably 50 plus pounds. And it's not because of the skiff, it's because of us. It's because of me trying to take out an additional passenger and all the gear to film my outings on. That's why she is basically pushed to the brink and taking on water. So that was a tough pill to have to swallow, and trying to make her perform like an actual technical poling skiff, a full-size one. The next thing that I had an issue with and was like, man, why can't I just do this? You got 4 rod holders right here. This one's, it's just me being nitpicky though. It's not that much of a hassle. You got 2 rods on this side, 2 rods on the other side. If you only have 1 angler on board, these rods will never ever get in the way, especially if you're casting up here on the bow. That's not going to be in the way of your back cast. It's just like having your kayak seat and then your fishing crate right behind you. So with 2 anglers on board though, this angler is still unaffected by these right there, but the person back here that's casting from the poling platform or the cockpit itself, these are in the way of your forward portion of the cast. Or if you're casting that way, they're not in your way, but now they're in the way of the angler up at the front. So depending on which way you're going, just know that you got 2 anglers on board. You're not going to want these out here in the way. So either take 2 rods so that each person can have 1 rod each, and you don't got to worry about it. But if you're like me, I want to make sure my passenger has the best possible experience, which is my son. I always put 2 rods back here on the poling platform where we've got 4 additional rod holders, and more often than not I've got them right here in the trolling ones because they're angled backwards towards the rear of the skiff. So that was kind of like a nuisance, not being able to just keep them right there. The other thing about the rods is whenever there's only 1 angler on board and you're up here fishing on the bow, and then you want to go back over here to the back to possibly get some tackle or to start operating the outboard, you have to move 2 of these because even though it's 45 inches wide, it is still, I'm not going to say it's tippy, but it can begin to get tippy. So as you're stepping through here in between the gunnel and the center console, or if you're on the gunnel, the skiff will tilt just a little bit, and it just feels kind of, you know, sketchy. So what you do is you keep your weight over the keel, the center line, and with the center of gravity directly above the center console, it doesn't tip as much. So these right here will be in the way depending on which side you want to go. So you got to move them really quick in order to get from the front to the back. Just a little small nuisance. Now that right there was a really hard, tough one to swallow because it's not with 2 anglers. Like if you're only 1 angler, then you can solve that issue. You can't. You just have to grow confidence that the skiff is not going to flip over whenever you're going from the front to the back without putting all your weight over the center console. So take that one for what it's worth. The only other thing that I've got that I can think of is the Mercury. It's not going to be for every outboard that can go onto this skiff. The max horsepower is 20, and I chose to go with this guy. If I went with a Honda, I've seen another owner of the H skiff with a Honda able to fully pull the outboard out of the water, and you can lock it in the very last trim tab. I can't do that with this Mercury because of the way it's designed. The tiller handle starts to hit my poling platform, and it prevents me from being able to fully raise it out of the water. That's a big issue because when I'm in the marsh, I'm fishing about 6 inches, or let's just say a foot or less of water. In the winter time, you're probably At the lower end is going to be 6 inches of water. And it is hard to push pole a micro skiff out there with 2 anglers on board and your skeg on the lower unit and the prop is in the water. It's really tough. There's no way for me to get it out of the water unless I come over here to the tiller and mess with the yaw and loosen a small little bolt under there, fully turn the tiller to the port side, because if you do it to the starboard side, the shift lever is going to hit my rod holder. So if you do it on the port side over here, you ain't got to worry about anything right there. It's going to clear it. But now, whenever the skiff is straight forward, when you're going straight, your tiller is going to be like offset like this right here. So trying to make a port side turn or turn to the left, you really gotta over exaggerate how far you gotta push this tiller to get turning towards the left hand side. And that right there, again, it's not the skiff's fault, it's just the design of the outboard. If I would have got a Honda, which I saw again firsthand, the owner being able to raise the outboard completely out of the water, it would alleviate that issue. The other issue that it causes is whenever we are shallow, the trolling motor can legit get us through 6 inches, but when you're that shallow, that skeg is dragging through the mud, so the efficiency on this thing and all the racket that it's going to make underneath the surface of the water could possibly be spooking some fish. So that's just a nuisance. I did think about getting a jack plate. However, I'm already pushing the weight limit. A jack plate's going to add an additional like 23 to 27 pounds back here. Plus there's a 4-inch offset. So instead of the motor being right here, we're now going to push it 4 inches away from the transom of this hull, and it's just not going to work. So that right there is a really big pill to swallow, because by simply going with another outboard, I probably would have been able to solve the issue, but that is a $3,000, maybe $3,000 plus issue just to swap motors out, and I don't think I'm gonna do that. Aside of that, if you treat the skiff the way it was intended to be like operated, then you're not gonna have any issues whatsoever. The other two sketchy things that I ran into was trying to take her into open water on a very calm day, 4 miles an hour or less in Galveston Bay. We went from the Texas City Dike to the Galveston ship channel. And what I did not account for was the big ships coming through there. We're talking about cargo tankers and stuff like that, and they put out some massive wake. It's darn right, like very long rolling swells. Water chop, she can handle just fine. I can get through moderate water chop at 16 miles an hour in the intercoastal, passing barges and overtaking barges, and she's going to perform flawlessly at 16 miles an hour. But whenever you're out there in the open water, looks are deceiving. The wakes coming off of those cargo ships are very long and rolling, and what happened to me on one trip is we basically went over one swell, the bow comes up, and as the bow is starting to crash, the next swell, because they're so long and gradual, the bow crashed right in front of another swell. We didn't have time for the bow to come back up. So we took a lot of water over the bow, got the trolling motor completely wet. We took a lot of water into the cockpit over the gunnels, well, not the gunnels, the bow, and some of the water forced its way in through the bow hatch right there. So that was sketchy. It was really scary. I learned right there, hey, if you want to fish Galveston Bay, buy yourself a darn bay boat. Use this thing for what it was intended to be used, and that is, it's a skinny water monster. So the marshes, the backwaters, bayous, and small water is basically what she was designed to be used for. That's my opinion. I mean, use her for whatever you want to use her. For those of you that are going to purchase a micro skiff of any sort, but you will quickly learn what your platform is able to handle. And I consider like a micro skiff 14 foot or smaller, maybe 500 pounds or less capacity, and you're truly limited to what you can do. And as long as you adhere to those limitations, you're going to have a pleasant experience. The only other sketchy thing that we've ran into was, or I say we, but it was me, because I was out there on my lonesome traveling down the intercoastal, and I had an oncoming barge. I was like hauling butt 23 to 25 miles an hour, something like that, and I did not let up on the throttle whenever I went through the barge's chop. What I've learned is to safely go through and overtake one of another boat or barge inside the intercoastal, is to slow down to about 16 miles an hour, and she can handle that perfectly. But because I didn't do that, what happened was the bow starts hopping up, hitting the chop and the little small wake that the other platform pushes on me. And when that happened, and not letting up on the throttle, eventually the prop, I think, comes up out of the water. And when I landed, it wasn't necessarily straight. I hit more of the chop, and because of the way I landed, I was at a different angle. The ass end of the skiff basically kicks itself. It throws me off balance, and I had one hand, the left hand, on the tiller, and then my right hand on the grab handle. Thank God this outboard has a tension lever right here. Let me see, I gotta turn this screen on, make sure y'all can, yeah, this right here is a tension knob. It stiffens up the tiller handle. Thank goodness I had that tightened up, because of the fact that I did, the outboard was still locked straight, and when I lost balance, my left hand didn't turn it to where it would completely just throw me off the skiff. So that right there was a little bit of my pride hurt, and just having to like swallow it, take one for the team, and learn that you cannot go full speed over the wake of oncoming traffic or overtake one of those barges, because you can go truly faster than the barges. Stupid fly, just had one go in my nose. So overtaking them, you got to slow down. 16 miles an hour is a safe traveling speed with this thing, and that's basically it. Those are my learning lessons. Hopefully, if you're deciding on a micro skiff of whatever sort, whether it's an H skiff, it's a solo skiff, if it's a John boat that you're gonna deck out and set it up the way you want to set it up, just realize that you're building it for a certain reason. You're not gonna take this and go offshore. You're not gonna use it as a bay boat. You're not gonna use it as a party boat and take out all kinds of passengers, because if you were, well, then you would just get that style of boat from the get-go. And what did I purchase one of these for? Is basically to try and do away with the kayaks that I have. Eventually the kayaks will go away, and I will only have this one right here. What do I use my kayaks for? It's predominantly marsh fishing, because I absolutely love it. It's peaceful back there. The sights and sounds of the wildlife, the fish, I mean, just everything that I get to see, I truly love it. And I need a skinny water monster like this right here. So I absolutely love this skiff. It's able to handle a lot with one angler, and she can excel at everything that a kayak can do, plus some. And as long as you realize that it's not a full-size poling skiff, then you're not going to have any issues. So hopefully you learned something. That is my story thus far, about close to 2 months of use out there on the water. And hindsight being 2020, if I would have known that my kids were going to want to if they were going to take an active interest in going fishing with me, I probably wouldn't have purchased this first. I would have got maybe an 18, 19 foot shoal water, and that way we could safely go out there and fish together. But you know, hey, what's done is done. I've got this first. It's paid for. Now we're setting our sights on maybe like a 19 foot shoal water, and maybe before the end of the year goes, we'll figure out how we're going to finance that. But I hope y'all learned something from it. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time off the water.